Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to be painting this beautiful vase of loose flowers, exotic peonies and oversized cornflowers. My reference photo and an in-depth tutorial showing the simplified line drawing for this is over on Patreon in a 3-part tutorial, so please follow the link below if you're interested in that. So I'm going to start off by sketching the flowers out simply, and now I've dipped a small detail brush into soapy water, and now I'm using masking fluid to mask out just a few little dots in the middle of this flower, and I'm going to just mask out a bit of light reflecting on the edge of the vase here and there. If you rub soap through your little brush before you use the masking fluid, it makes it really easy to wash out so that you won't spoil your brush. But please do use an old brush just in case, because sometimes masking fluid, if it gets lodged in the ferrule, it can stiffen up and ruin the brush. So best to use an old brush. But the soap works really well, I find, to protect it. That'll do. We don't need any more. Now what I'm going to do is, today I'm trying a slightly different approach. I've masked off my painting down the middle of the page to have it as a more sort of portrait format. And in this little section on the left side, I'm going to try out my paint mixtures to check that the colours are right, but also to check that I've got the right paint and water ratios. So here I'm checking my first colour for the peonies, and I'm mixing this out of alizarin crimson and a tiny bit of ultramarine blue dipped into it. The next colour I'm going to test is to make sure that I can get a nice green from gamboge and ultramarine blue in various mixes. So this painting will be done completely with these 3 primary colours. That's alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue and gamboge, and they're all Cotman tube paints. But you could use any colours for these, any sort of similar colours that you've got and that you like. That's a nice green. It's got a bit more yellow in it, and I like that. It's nice and fresh, so I think that will work well. Now the last colours I want to check is the mix of blue with a little bit of crimson in it, alizarin crimson, for the cornflowers. And using these same colours throughout the painting will keep a nice colour harmony throughout the whole thing. And I think that's about fine. I think that's going to work nicely. The first thing that I want to do is to paint the background wet in wet. So using my large Ron Ranson Pro Art Harky brush, I'm wetting all around the edges, all 4 edges, wetting them thoroughly, and then I'm taking a small squirrel mop and randomly wetting across the flowers so that I've got some patches of dry unwet paper, so that when I put my wash across the page where the paint is wet, then I'll get nice diffusion of paint, but on the dry patches I'll keep some white paper there, which I think will help to keep my painting fresh. So now, using my size 6 squirrel mop, I'm scrubbing this pretty wash of alizarin crimson with a tiny bit of ultramarine blue in the mix across the page. As I say, I'm keeping some white patches randomly across the flowers in the middle, building up slightly darker, richer pink across the bottom and the top on the right, so that that indicates light coming in from the top left. And now I'm taking a much thicker, drier mix of alizarin crimson with a little bit of ultramarine blue, and I'm painting in my peony petals, but I'm painting them in sort of with much richer paint onto the wet background, the damp background, and so I'm getting these softly diffused marks, but because the paint is richer, it's staying there and it's working quite well, so it's sort of fairly strong but diffused at the same time. Be careful that you don't use watery paint here, because this is what would cause cauliflowers and blooms that you don't really want at the moment. You can see that the petals are reasonably defined, nice rich colours, and then I'll go in and add some more ultramarine blue to the mixture and add some shadows in here and there. And those will diffuse into the petals and soften back. Just a few random fallen petals on the shelf below the vase. And now with this mixture of gamboge and ultramarine blue, I'm going to flick in some leaves while the paint is while the background is still damp, and these leaf shapes will soften back. This is a synthetic Polina Bright size 1 synthetic mop brush, and it's really nice for painting leaves. A couple of leaves, fallen leaves, again on the shelf below. Just a few stems for the cornflowers and for the peonies. And we're nearly done. Just a nice splash of colour across the left side of the vase, going right up over the masking fluid, so that we'll have a nice highlight that should show. I'm trying to emphasise the roundness of the vase shape with the shape of my brush strokes. Now I shall leave it to dry completely and then come back and carry on. So it's all thoroughly dry, so I can continue now. The first thing that I'll do is just quickly rub off the masking fluid. You can rub it off with your finger, or if you prefer, you can use an eraser or a piece of masking tape, and the glue will pull off the latex. And now I'm going to paint in those feathery wispy, skinny little petals that are so distinctive of cornflowers. I'm making my cornflowers much larger here than they are in the photograph, but I'm using my artistic license and really emphasising and enjoying playing with these shapes. This is my small Chinese calligraphy brush. It's just a generic brush that I found online. Dotting and dashing at the ends, and I shall use a small squirrel mop to soften back some of those petals as well, and I'll work my way round all three of the flowers, painting them all in exactly the same way. And a little bit more alizarin crimson added to the mix just fleshes out the base of the flowers with those tiny, that second frilly layer of petals in the middle of the cornflowers. And those are just about done. Just a couple of little indications of maybe some cornflower petals on the shelf too. I was quite pleased with the way the peonies turned out with the first wash, but I still think they need a little bit of definition. This is a loose painting, so I'm not going to really define them, but taking some nice rich alizarin crimson, I'm going to layer up and put a glaze over some of these petals in places, just to build up the shape and the form of the flower a little bit more. I want to keep it nice and fresh, keep that lovely transparent look. And I'll work across all three peonies in the same way. And now to add in a few stems and leaves, working with wet paint onto the dry painting so that we get nice hard edge shapes. You can see we're really bringing the painting together now, working on top of the more diffused background. I'm trying to go with the less is more approach here and trying to limit the amount of leaves and things that I put on. Keeping it nice and simple. And now a splash of colour on the vase. And some pure, rich, inky consistency gamboge on the areas that I masked out with masking fluid in the middle of this exotic peony here. Now you could call it finished now, but I actually like to add some spatter to my loose floral paintings. I think it really helps to bring the background together with the flowers and adds that sort of semi-abstract, fresh finish. But if you'd prefer your painting without the spatter, then that's the time to stop. I'm using a hog bristle brush and I'm just spattering mostly around the base and the right side of the painting and leaving the rest of it spatter free. And lastly, a little bit of definition with some dark blue on the vase, on a few of the edges, not all of them, just a few little marks here and there, just to bring that vase out a bit more. And I think I'm happy with that, but just to check, I'll remove the tape. Once the tape's removed, it gives me the chance to look at the painting sort of with fresh eyes, so to speak, because I can kind of see it as if it was in a frame or a mount, and can decide whether or not I want to do anything else to it. And I'm quite happy with it, but I can see that I need a little bit more dark, so I'm going to add in some darker paint mixed from alizarin crimson and the ultramarine blue, and I'm going to put a dark shadow down through the vase on this side here, leaving my white highlights. I think you can see already how that's really helping with the shape and the form of the vase, following the shape of the vase. And then I'll put in a few dark purpley highlight, low lights I suppose they are, shadows here and there. Not many, just enough to finish off and bring the painting together. So here it is, it's all finished and I'm very pleased with it. I must admit, I think it's my favourite vase of flowers that I've painted so far. If you like this, please give us a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you click on the bell icon, you'll be notified every time I post a new video, which is about 2 times a week, maybe more sometimes. Thanks so much for watching, and thank you so much to my wonderful Patreon group who support this channel. I'll see you again soon. Happy painting and bye.